Herzlich willkommen zu einem neues Geschichte. It's a neues Geschichte in Deutschland. It's Weimar time.
Time for the cabaret and time for billions of marks. Billions and billions of them. But first of all, it is appropriate to discuss the creation of the Weimar Republic. Yeah. The Treaty of Versailles, which preceded it, and the Weimar Constitution, which also preceded it, but also was part of it, until
So basically, this episode 12.
It is.
So we've now had more episodes than members of a football team.
Yes.
It's just going to cover the major documents that were the sort of founding blocks of the Weimar Constitution.
Yeah.
So should we start with the Treaty of Versailles? So
yes.
This is a biggie.
It was a biggie.
Often cited as a cause of the Second World War.
We shan't go into too much detail of it because, frankly, do it yourself. But Woodrow Wilson, George Clemenceau of France, David Lloyd George, United States, France, and Britain, they decided how to deal with Germany,
the losers,
which it blamed for
the First
World War.
So what conclusions did they come to, Remy?
Well, they blamed Germany completely for the First World War, and
famously, what clause was that? I cannot remember. Work that out yourself.
It was Article
231.
231 was a war guilt clause. So it ordered Germany to pay reparations at $6.6 billion, but obviously that was then pounds. Sorry, but that was in their
old money.
Germany had to make payments in coal, for example. The Saarland was placed under the control of the League of Nations until 1945. And then all coal production from there was given to France. Germany had to abolish conscription. The army reduced to 100,000. No big guns were allowed.
Damn.
So to be honest, Arnold Schwarzenegger would not have survived.
Yes. The Rhineland was demilitarized, and the French
lots of German land, or land where there was a lot of German people, was handed over to other countries. Poland, Czechoslovakia, all gained from the Treaty of Versailles. What was the attitude of people in Germany to this treaty?
Well, the Reichstag actually passed it 237 in favour to 138 against.
That doesn't make sense.
237 in favour to 138 against.
Oh, I thought you said 238
No. But that's because the Allies basically said, we're not negotiating, you must accept this. But to many, there was a talks of a diktat, which is...
what is a diktat?
This is a good question.
Chloe, any ideas?
It's an enforced thing.
It's basically an enforced.
It
dictated down.
Yeah, it dictated down. And the whole stab in the back myth was created, and the November criminals, as they're called, were the people who signed the treaty.
When was the treaty actually signed, though? I believe it was in 1919. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, I'm going to go with yes. Again, you can go check. But it's
But it although a lot of blame can be attributed to the Allies for putting down such harsh conditions on the Germans, they had to pay loads of reparations, give up loads of land, a more balanced view from historians has come about, saying that, it was difficult for the French, who had lost so much in the First World War, had their land muddied by the trenches, to just simply say, the Germans, it's fine, keep your land, keep your weapons, keep your army. It was difficult for them. It was still a compromise between Clemenceau, who wanted to
really
hit the Germans hard, and Woodrow Wilson, who wanted to protect Germany and
basically introduce world peace.
Yeah, so it was difficult. So that is a summary of the Treaty of Versailles. So now moving on a few months
to the Weimar Constitution, which is
signed in August 1919, I believe.
It is correct.
So ratified in August
and written in November 1918 by the liberal lawyer Hugo Prowse.
So we mentioned in the last podcast about the National Assembly. So they were the Parliament, but they helped to write the Reichstag, so to speak. They helped to write the Constitution. Remy, key features.
So my favourite one, and which still remains fantastic, is the Bill of Rights. It allowed.
Did we hear a clapping?
It protected personal freedoms, freedom of speech, banned censorship, protected equality before the law, and religious freedom, all of which are good things. It allowed the creation of such wonderful paintings that we shall cover in future episodes, such as by Gjorgertz. The Reichstag was the lower, more important house. It made the law. It was what made the laws, and it was elected by proportional representation. Important. The Reichsrat was the upper, less important house. It could, in theory, delay or initiate legislation, but not block it. And it represented the 17 Länder of the states of the federal system. The president was directly elected, served for 7 years. He was the head of the state and commander-in-chief. And this is important again. He had the right to dissolve the Reichstag and appoint the chancellor. And he could use Article 48, which was the power
Do not
of...
forget Article 48.
Power of the president to rule by decree and override constitutional rights of citizens in the event of emergency. And the chancellor lastly was appointed by the president, but he needed the support from the Reichstag. Article 54 said that he must resign in the event of a vote of no confidence. So, Nathan, what issues could there have been with this constitution?
Right, so there were 3 big sort of controversies surrounding the Weimar Constitution. Firstly, as Remy said, proportional representation. Some people argue that was a bad thing, that no party could gain enough seats to really build a stable, strong government.
Led to a fragmented
coalitions. Yeah, often the coalitions had 3, even 4 parties, and it's difficult to run a government like that.
And be stable.
But on the other hand, it meant that everyone could get, all parties had a good chance of getting into the parliament, getting representation, even taking part in government, and that's important with with a society that was still quite polarised.
Yeah.
And you could even argue that the Nazis in the 30s were getting 30-40% of the vote, which in a first-past-the-post system might get them a huge majority, but as it was, they didn't. So maybe it's a good thing.
You could argue that.
Second controversy, Remy.
The relationship between the president and the Reichstag. There was meant to be a system of checks and balances, but it was quite complex. The president was meant to be above the parties. He was a kind of, as a Kaiser, a substitute emperor, and it seemed that kind of the Reichstag didn't have that much power compared to the president, particularly when you take into account Article 48.
It's a big article, guys.
Yeah, big article.
48.
It
48.
It allowed the president really
48.
to become almost a dictator in some instances.
Remind us what that was. Which article?
Was it 40?
46?
48, guys. 48.
The emergency decrees, guys.
Yeah.
The third controversy is kind of linked to the one we were talking about in the last episode about Aber and his government. Whether traditional institutions were allowed to continue, although we did have democratic rights, the Bill of Rights, as Remy clapped, we still had the civil service, the judiciary, the army, even universities remained very much
old, conservative,
Kaiserreich-like.
Yeah.
Similar to what they
were.
They were under the Kaiserreich and were not really reformed, and you could argue that was a fundamental flaw of Weimar, because the big institutions, big powerful institutions, remained conservative and therefore opposed to Weimar.
Yeah, you'll see the judiciary particularly, helped rather biased towards the
authoritarian right wing.
So it had an impact. But quickly, significance.
Yeah.
The Weimar Republic was a huge step forward from the Kaiserreich. It was, in fact, the most advanced democracy in the world at its time. It's universal
suffrage. I don't know if that's
for,
true, but
for male,
let's assume it is.
Males and women's, males and women.
For boys and girls.
Boys and girls, guys
X
and dolls.
and XYs.
Yep. Some claim, however, that the proportional representation of Article 48 made it fundamentally flawed. However, you have to remember that the Republic hadn't actually got control over the circumstances in which it operated. So maybe the social and economic problems that Germany faced meant that were really the thing that undermined the Weimar Republic, rather than the constitution itself. So I'd argue that the new constitution couldn't really have solved all of
Germany's
problems. However, it was not the cause of all of Germany's problems.
But that is a big question. But I think all round decent job by the constitutional.
I will give them
7 out of 10.
8 out of 10.
8 out of 10. Chloe?
7.5.
7.5. Good compromise.
I endorse the Icelandic constitution more, because that was written basically on Wikipedia. But that is for another discussion, another time.
Yes.
So, yep, Weimar, and look forward to some discussions in the future. Goodbye.